What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, we're going way back. The original Los Angeles punk rock shit. And it's a nice tie-in because, it's kind of the reason why I started the pod, was to interview original old school people that I thought weren't getting enough shine, and to paint the picture of, this big, beautiful beast, which is punk and hardcore. And this ties in nicely because this is the 3-year anniversary of the pod. So congratulations, everyone. Thank you for keeping it alive. Everyone that listens every week. And, the people that participate on the Instagrams and send emails and DMs and all that. That's stuff that keeps it going. And especially the Patrons. This would not exist without all of you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate the support. If that would have gone away at any point, the pod would have ended. If the popularity would have dropped significantly at any point, the pod would have ended. And if I didn't have the help of everyone that helps out every week, Dan Sant, Posy Chris, Ben Edge, Clevo, Pops, episode 1, the legend Joe Rivas, Stu, and just everyone that passes through and helps. This is a group effort. This is not all me. So just want to say thank you for the support, and let's get on with the pod.
"185 Miles South", a hardcore punk rock podcast.
What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, we are talking hardcore. Actually, we're going back. We're talking that first-gen Los Angeles punk rock. We're going to start out with a starter kit from Ben Edge, and then we're going to bring on Cliff Roman from the Weirdos to talk about what it was like to be there, and then we're going to do some other segments later. But helping out, you know him, you love him. It is the best dressed man on the pod. It is Daniel Sant. What's up, Dan?
Early man walked away as modern man took control.
Also helping out, it is Ben Merlis, a.k.a. Ben Edge, a.k.a. Bedge. What's up, Ben?
What's going on?
All right, Ben, you got to get us up to speed. 1977, Los Angeles. What's happening?
Son, you're not a kid anymore.
Oh, no, I go to
shows.
Dad, I already know all this stuff.
Well, they don't teach you about everything
At shows.
Okay, Mr. Smarty Pants? So just listen. When boys and girls get a little older, they start getting
interested in punk and hardcore subgenres. Starter kit.
All right, I'm going to do my starter kit is all records that came out from LA bands between 77 and 78. Very specific era. This is the mask era we like to talk about on the show. The thing that is, gets kind of sort of wiped off the map by what I call 1.5. So this is what happens immediately before that. Hollywood-centric scene. The Germs, they came out of West LA, Uni High. Pat Smear and Darby Crash, BFF. Pat Smear, you know him from, of course, Nirvana and Foo Fighters, but this is where he got his start. And Darby Crash, mythologized to no end because he committed suicide at such a young age. But their second single, Lexicon Devil, came out on Slash Records. It was the first thing that Slash Records ever put out, and it is a work of art. And I picked the song Lexicon Devil from it, and I really hope it's on Spotify. I did not check. There are 2 versions of the song. One is it was re-recorded the next year for their album GI, which is also incredible. But this is sort of where you first hear the brilliance of the Germs on a recorded medium. The very poetic lyrics. Darby Crash had a way with words. Great song. Kind of can't say enough about it. And then I'm going to move on to the Weirdos. Cliff Roman wrote this song in 1977. You'll hear all about it later. We got the Neutron Bomb. This is from also from their second single, 1978, Danger House Records. We talk about this all the time on the show. This is one of the biggest sounding punk records ever recorded in an era where there weren't that many big sounding records. I'd say never mind the Bollocks is huge. That came out the year before that. But the Weirdos, one of the first LA punk bands, if not the first, definitely the first musically competent LA punk band. It took the Germs a while to get going. We got the Neutron Bomb. We definitely have talked this to death. You all know it. You all love it, or at least you should by now. I'd say if you can't vibe with Lexicon Devil or We Got the Neutron Bomb, LA punk is not for you. And I would say probably punk as an entire genre of music is not for you. I think it would be fair to say. Moving on to the Bags. This was a band that was fronted by Alice Bagg. She grew up in East LA. They were more of a Hollywood-based band. Craig Lee's mom, he was a guitarist of the Bags, was famous for being a television producer. I think she produced MASH, or she directed MASH, which is, so you have real working class background with Alice, and then, silver spoon in mouth Hollywood industry family with Craig Lee, and then they combine to start one of the greatest punk bands ever from LA. I picked the song Survive. This is off their single Survive. B-side is Babylonian Gorgon, and this is also Danger House Records, 1978. Man, it's got this, I think we've talked about this on the show before. It's got this cool kind of like film noir, like finger snapping, standing under a street light with your, detective coat on kind of vibe. And then it just busts into hard, fast punk. Really interesting. And then it goes back to that whole sort of unusual intro.
Right. And the second time you're flipping a quarter underneath a lamppost.
Exactly. That's what we're going for here. There's really not much else like it. And I highly recommend Alice Bagg's autobiography, Violence Girl. It is a very interesting book. She had a rough upbringing, and she found solace in the LA punk scene. Moving on to, and I was going to pick a Dils song, and here's why I'm not picking it. Those guys are from Carlsbad, which is San Diego County, and then they moved to San Francisco. I thought at some point they had lived in LA, but since Cliff Roman can't remember, they probably were not living in LA, because he would know. He has a photographic memory. So I'm not talking Dils, although they do have 2 7-inches both on LA punk labels. I'm going Screamers. Now, if we think that the Weirdos were sort of the coulda, shoulda, woulda if they had made an album in 1978, the Screamers are even a more extreme example of that. They never even made a record of any sort. They never made a single. They were selling out the whiskey, but they never made a record. I think they were ambitious and they thought they would make an art film instead, which never even got finished, and then they broke up. But they are now officially released at least on streaming. I think their records, there's vinyl that came out too.
If you look on vinyl, Ben. I bought it on vinyl within the last year.
Well, there it is. On Spotify, this is under Screamers Demo Hollywood 1977. That's what it's listed. And the song is called Peer Pressure. And the interesting thing about the Screamers is that they did not have a guitarist and they did not have a bassist. They had a drummer, a very angry singer, and they had 2 keyboard players, one guy playing a Fender Rhodes and one guy playing something called an ARP Odyssey. And so you figure keyboards and drums, this is going to be whack. This isn't going to be hard. This isn't going to be the kind of punk rock I like. This shit is hard. This is angry ass punk music. It is No Cool Cough by or Cough Cool or whatever the fuck by the Misfits. This is raging punk music. So I have to throw them in here because they are one of the first, and also they are singular. There is no one else like them. They are not trying to sound like the Ramones or the Damned or whatever. If I had to guess, I'd say they were influenced by the band Suicide, although maybe they might have even recorded this thing before Suicide ever had a record out either. So, the last, but certainly not least, the best dressed man, Daniel Sant's favorite LA punk band. Dan, what am I going to pick?
You've already, that's interesting because you've already picked two of the absolute greatest as far as I'm concerned. Give me a clue.
Their fans tend to be of a sort of black cat tattoo, fuzzy dice on the rear view mirror varietal.
You mean Zach's favorite band, Social Distortion?
No. Actually, X. I'm thinking an X.
Oh,
yeah, because I was going Pennywise, dude.
So X, their first single comes out on Danger House in, I believe, 78. It is Adult Books. The B-side is We're Desperate. I'm picking the song We're Desperate. Both these songs get re-recorded on their second album, which comes out in the early 80s. But these are the OG versions. We're Desperate featured prominently in the documentary The Decline of Western Civilization. This is sort of like, John Doe and Exene Cervenka are the two lead singers of the band. They sort of trade off lead vocals and then join in together for the choruses. Really interesting. Exene, not a good singer. John Doe is a good singer. Their voices combined make something incredible. So it's kind of like the sum are greater than the parts. I hope I got that right. This is sort of like talking about their bohemian lifestyle. We can't pay the rent. We're about to get evicted. Our whole life is a wreck. We're desperate. Get used to it. It's sort of like kind of like this theme song for the Bohemian. But Billy Zoom is probably my dad's age, so he was around way before punk. He is the guitarist, and he is extremely competent. The X is always talked about as like they were the most musically proficient of all these bands because they were a little bit older than everybody and had experience. Well, I don't know if Exene was in any bands before X, but they were no spring chickens when it came to playing music, and they really did a cool thing by combining punk music with old school rock and roll music, rockabilly music. I know now you'd be like, oh, psychobilly, gross, but no, I'm not talking about all the shit that came after them. This is quintessential LA punk music. So to recap, Germs, Lexicon Devil, Weirdos, we got the Neutron Bomb, Bags, Survive, Screamers, Peer Pressure, X, We're Desperate, and here are my honorables. I'm just going to name bands. The Skulls, the Dogs, the Controllers, the Dickies, Shock, the Eyes, the Plugs, the Alley Cats, and the Deadbeats. And if you want to get all this shit as easily as possible, Danger House Records has a singles box set. It's all on Spotify. It's on CD. It's on a 7-inch box set. And then there is a What Records compilation called What Stuff. And that is almost everything I mentioned. There's a few things maybe on Bomp that fall outside of that. But you have almost everything from this era, with the exception of the few bands that made records, made albums, which would be the Dickies and the Germs and the Plugs. So there you go. That's your mission. Listen to this shit.
Yeah, everything that's available on Spotify from Ben's starter kit, we'll put it on the playlist. Go to 185milessouth.com, click that playlist link at the top of the page, and check out the music we're talking about. We'll toss it on there with everything else we talk about on this podcast. Dan, we're kind of dialing in, it's basically all the stuff that came out before Nervous Breakdown, right? Do you have a favorite of all this stuff?
The Germs and the Weirdos are just top tier for me. I did enjoy Ben putting on a release that you basically had to have a time machine to go listen to until maybe like 6 months ago. The Screamers stuff. But It's I mean, nothing beats the absolute power of We Got the Neutron Bomb. Like, that's just a golden song in any generation, in any genre, you know? But there's a lot of stuff that you mentioned in the rundown of other bands that are really good. Ben was kidding me because X has never sounded good to me, like, ever. I like John Doe in the film Lost Prophets with Ad Rock, but that's about it.
Yeah, X kind of missed me as well as Channel 3. Like, those are the two, like, classic old school bands from around there that they just never really connected with me. But I need to, all this music has merit, and really most stuff that makes it to album has merit. Like, people had to take the time to write songs, put it out, and so it has some merit, and I'm not trying to hate on the stuff. I just got to give it another try. And Ben made me a short X playlist a long time ago because I asked him to, and I'm a dick, and I still haven't listened to it. So right after Husker Du, I'm getting into X. What's up? All right, this week on the pod, we have Cliff Roman from the Weirdos. How you doing, Cliff?
Doing great. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this. Also helping out is Ben Edge, a.k.a. Bedge. And Cliff, where did you grow up, and how do you get into punk? And do you remember your first punk show?
Well, I grew up in North Hollywood, California, for the most part, in Los Angeles. And I was born in Los Angeles and raised in Los Angeles. And I got into punk through my interest in music. When I was in high school, or right after I graduated high school, I went and saw the New York Dolls when I was about 18 or 19 years old. And then I saw, after the Dolls, Iggy and the Stooges. And also I saw David Bowie, Spiders from Mars. And these were all real big influences on me. But then when I saw the Ramones, that I was convinced I had nothing to lose. I should start a band, and I wanted to play punk rock music, whatever that was. And I was learning about the groups and reading about bands in New York, like Television, and bands in England, like the Sex Pistols and the Clash and the Buzzcocks. I was buying records, and I started writing some songs, and then I started the band.
What publications were you reading about stuff in? Like, how could you get information about all these bands in those early years?
Yeah, so we through things like the British music papers. So I bought, and I still have my big stack, my big collection of Melody Maker, Sounds, and NME, and magazines like, well, there's a magazine out of New York called Punk, and then there was other magazines, and I would read stuff actually in the LA Times about the Sex Pistols right in the front section, when they used profanity on a TV show, and when they, did any outrageous stunts, it seemed to make the headlines, and not the headlines, but it would make it into the paper. So I was following that, and I was reading, let's see, New York Rocker was another one. And then, so those were the main, and then I was buying fanzines and Bomp magazine as well. I was reading and collecting Bomp magazine.
Could you find like punk at just a newsstand in LA?
Punk, I think, I'm trying to remember where I used to buy it. I might have bought punk at a record store, like there was a store called Moby Disc where I used to go and buy my records.
Right on.
They used to have right next to the register a little shoebox with the latest 45s from England, and it said punk on it, So that's where I bought the first Clash single, the first Sex Pistols single, the first Buzzcock single.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Cliff, did you ever go to any punk shows in LA before the Weirdos existed? Can you kind of describe what the scene was like, or if
so
you
Zach?
Yeah.
There were no punk shows before the Weirdos existed.
Perfect. So then,
The
if you could
first punk show was when the Weirdos played on 45 years ago on April 16 at the Orpheum Theater, and we played with the Zeros and the Germs. And in the audience was the Damned. They just got into town to do a show. And also in the audience were Kim Fowley, Rodney Bingenheimer, and Greg Shaw. The Screamers, a bunch of musicians, artists, photographers. And that was, no one has, there. I don't know of any other punk show before that. You know, I did see the Ramones open for the Flamin' Groovies, and then they came back to LA and played the Whiskey, the Starwood, a few other shows we went to. And, but they were from New York. So, you know, that was probably, you know, and then before them, they weren't called a punk band, but there was, you know, Iggy and the Stooges. When Raw Power came out, I saw them at the Whiskey. And then before that, when the New York Dolls first album came out, they played the Whiskey. And I went and saw them, their first show there at the Whiskey.
So
but there was no punk scene. There was no local punk scene at all. It all started to coalesce after we did that show on April 16th, 1977.
So can you describe the music scene in LA before the Weirdos existed?
Yes.
The local LA bands, who were
Yes.
they? What kind of music were they
So,
playing?
so, you know, there was, for a period, 74, 75 was glam rock or glitter. And also, Rodney Bingenheimer had the English Disco Club on Sunset Boulevard where we used to go. And this is when I'm like, you know, 18, 19, 20 years old. And the scene was, you know, I remember seeing bands like the Runaways, the Quit, the Motels, and the Zippers, and they weren't really considered punk rock bands. No one was using the word punk rock, and that sort of maybe came out of New York with Richard Hell and television and that scene at CBGB's, and maybe the you know, the English bands like the Sex Pistols, the Clash, and the Buzzcocks and the Damned. And we started reading about punk rock in the British papers first, but there was no organized scene. It was never really organized. But what happened was we do this show. It's the first Germ show. We had done 2 shows leading up to this show. Our very first show, Zach, was on April 2nd, 1977. We played with the Nerves and a couple other bands, and that was our first show. We had no drummer. The Nerves discovered us when we were rehearsing above the soundstage that they used for their show, and they heard us playing and invited us to play with them at their show. So we had no drummer. It was just me on guitar, a bass player, another guitarist, and our singer, John Denny. And it was the 4 original Weirdos: Dave Trout on bass, Dick Denny on guitar, myself on guitar, and John Denny on vocals. And we had our look together. And a week later, we do 2 shows at the Orpheum Theater on Sunset Boulevard across the street from Tower Records. And it's the Nerves, the Weirdos, and the Zippers. Now, the Nerves and the Zippers usually don't show up on lists of LA punk rock bands. They might, but usually I don't see them. And our second show, we did like 2 nights, 2 shows a night, still no drummer. And we were wearing our paint splattered clothes. Our hair was cropped short. We had the look together. We had the sound together, and we were getting noticed. And a photographer named Debbie Scow introduced us to Nicky Beat, a drummer who had just left a band called Venus and the Razorblades. And they were one of those bands that was also in LA at the time that was sort of a rock band playing the clubs like the Starwood or the Whiskey, or opening for bands that came into town. And that they weren't really called punk bands back then. And so Nikki joins our band. We're supposed to do the show with the Nerves and the Zippers and a band from San Diego called the Zeros. And at the last minute, the Nerves and the Zippers drop out of the show. We wanted to still play because we were on a roll. We have like 5 sets under our belt, and we got a drummer now, a really good drummer, Nikki Beat Alexander. And we go to a day or two before the show. The Nerves and the Zippers drop out. I go down to this club, the Orpheum. It's not a club, it's a theater. I go down there and I pay the $90 so we could do the show. We'd already made the flyers and did them, and the flyers are saying Nerves, Weirdos, Zippers, and Zeros. And on April 16 at the Orpheum. And so I paid the $90 to get the theater so we could do the show. A few days before that, we go to the opening of Bomb Records and we run into the Germs. And they're like, well, we're a band. We're called the Germs. They had these handmade shirts, that said Germs. And we asked them if they'd want to perform with us, that coming Saturday night. So they said, well, we're not really ready. We can't play. We haven't rehearsed. And we just booked them anyways. So now I have, the Weirdos, the Zeros, and the Germs, and the Weirdos with our drummer, Nikki Beat Alexander. And there we are. We do our show with the Damned in the audience. I didn't know. I didn't invite them. They just show up. The place, the Germs get kicked out of the building because Darby, who was called Bobby Pin then, put the microphone in a jar of peanut butter. And sitting in the audience holding the jar of peanut butter is Belinda Carlisle. And in the Germs, is Pat Smear. They're both in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame now. Belinda with the Go-Go's and Pat Smear with not only Nirvana, but also the Foo Fighters. So the Germs get kicked out by the owner of the theater because they were throwing peanut butter around. And at that point, no one was in the theater. So they go across the street to Tower Records. Then the Zeros play. And now the theater's about a third full. And the Zeros are like this. They look like the Standells or something like that. And they play really cool music. And everyone really liked the Zeros. So they were great. They went on to be considered an LA punk rock band. They're actually from the San Diego area. And would do many shows with us and all the punk rock shows in LA in 1977 and on. And then we come on. The place is packed now. Word had gotten out about the Weirdos through Rodney Bingenheimer. My girlfriend, Gracie, had called him the Sunday before and was telling him about the Weirdos. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to go to that show. And then also Greg Shaw was there from Bomb Records, and Kim Fowley, who was the producer of the Runaways and their manager. And, we do our set with Nikki on drums, and then Captain Sensible, the bass player of the Damned, asked to play with us for an encore. So he gets on stage, and we just sort of like do a rendition of Pushing Too Hard by the Seeds, and he's playing along with us, to the amusement of the rest of the band members and his manager sitting there in the audience. Well, the next day, I get a phone call from Greg Shaw telling me that we made history. And that Sunday, Ronnie Bingenheimer starts talking about, the punk show with the Weirdos and the Zeros and the Germs. And the rest is history. People tell me, and the Screamers were there in the audience also. After the show, John Denny and I are talking for quite a while with the Screamers behind the theater. And that was the first time we met them. And they were one of the first wave of LA punk rock bands. The first wave of LA punk rock bands was the Weirdos, the Zeros, the Germs, a band called the Dils, and I think that's pretty much like the first wave of LA punk rock bands.
Screamers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Screamers.
Right on.
And so then, 1977 was the start of it. And I can talk about what happened next if you're interested.
I actually wanted to know what Darby Crash was like as a person. Did you know him very well?
Well, yes, he was very soft-spoken, very shy, extremely shy, very, very nice. And then he had this persona on stage. He was always like cutting himself, hurting himself. They never rehearsed. I was fascinated by them and talked to Darby a lot. He was really good at writing lyrics. He even once he typed up all his lyrics and put a safety pin through them and gave it to me. And I remember reading his lyrics and thinking they were brilliant. But they couldn't. It was so early in the development of the Germs, they couldn't get through a show without getting kicked off the stage. And that happened time and time again that year. And then a little later on, maybe they got their shit together and they could get through a set. And then they didn't really get it together until they recorded that album for Slash.
Right.
And, but Darby was he was a very cool guy. His name was Jan Breen, and he went to Uni High School, and that's where he met Pat Smear.
Right.
I forget Pat's name. It's George something.
Ruthenberg,
right. So and then they knew Belinda Carlisle was just this girl we all knew that was a friend of the Germs. And I think she had a nickname, Dottie Danger or something like that. And I knew Lorna. I knew all of them. We were, they even gave me. Have you ever heard of the Germ burn?
Yeah. Yes.
Yep, I got one on my left wrist.
You still have it?
Yep.
Wow.
It hurt, so I pulled away, and it's kind of light, but it's still there. I can find it.
Amazing. When the Weirdos started,
yeah,
you put together this band with the Denny brothers. What are your primary musical influences? What are you aiming for? What are you trying to get the band to sound like or look like?
The thing that really ignited us was when I saw, I really liked the New York Dolls and Iggy and the Stooges, and before that, I had a varied musical taste. I was into music since I was an 8-year-old boy. I learned clarinet. My family is a family of musicians. My grandfather played clarinet. My mom played piano. My grandmother played piano. Everyone played an instrument in my family. And, I started learning classical music and how to read music. And then I got a saxophone, and then I was in a band. I was always in a band playing sax when I was in high school. And we'd play parties, and we like to play James Brown. We'd play James Brown. We'd play Electric Flag. We'd play, whatever, like Spirit, whatever we liked. I was always in a band, or always playing with kids my age who were musicians. I was a musician and an artist. I didn't hang out really with the jocks. And so growing up, I listened to the radio. I liked Bob Dylan, the Rolling Stones. I loved the Beatles. I liked the Kinks. Then I liked, Jimi Hendrix. I liked the Grateful Dead. I liked old blues. I liked the Who. I liked jazz. I liked modern music. I had varied tastes. I used to go to, see jazz musicians when I was in high school. And or I'd go to the Ash Grove and see folk music or blues, or I'd go to the Whiskey. I saw the Kinks play the Whiskey, in 1969 when they were touring for their Arthur album, and so I was always buying records, and then when I was in college, I started buying used records. And bands like, I started collecting like the Standells and, Paul Revere and the Raiders and the Monkees and the Beach Boys and then the Velvet Underground. So I get to the Velvet Underground, and Lou Reed, David Bowie, T-Rex, Roxy Music, and then I'm into the New York Dolls and Iggy and the Stooges. So Raw Power was, I loved Raw Power, but I couldn't play. James Williamson was like nuts. I couldn't play that stuff. I was just learning how to play guitar. But then the Ramones come out with their first album, and I'm like, I discovered the bar chord and I could write songs. And I wrote about 5 or 6 songs that inspired John Denny. He collaborated with me on a couple songs. It also inspired Dave Trout. I started the band with Dave Trout. Then we added John Denny. John I knew from high school. Dave I met at Cal Arts. I was a student at California Institute of the Arts. And Dix is John's brother. So it was just the 4 of us. That was the nucleus of the band. And then we added Nikki Beat Alexander on drums, and that completed the original Weirdos.
You and John went to North Hollywood High?
Yes.
Go Huskies.
Huskies. All right.
Yeah. So speaking
I had quite an education there. North Hollywood High was amazing.
Yeah.
When I grew up in North Hollywood, North Hollywood was where everyone who worked in studios or music, their family, that's where they bought houses with their kids. So all my friends, their parents were involved in either the movie industry or the music industry. And, we were right there, right in the middle of it. And John Denny I met at high school. And then I met, Dix, John Denny and I were really good friends. And like his mother was an actress, she was, Dodo Denny was in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. She was one of the moms.
Wow.
And so she was like my second mother. And John was an artist. Dix was an artist. I was an artist. Dave Trout was an artist. We did all our flyers. We designed our clothes. And we were like a do-it-yourself band, like the first one. We were like, Spanky and our gang when they put on a show. Hey, kids, let's put on a show. That's what it was really like. Who told me that? Who told me that? Tomato Duplenty. That's how he described the Weirdos.
Wow.
You guys are like Spanky and our gang when they put on a show.
You need the little dog. But when you were talking about songwriting, I'm just curious about let's drill down into the first couple years of the Weirdos and who wrote which songs, like the song Teenage. Who wrote that one?
Okay, I wrote all the songs and all the music for the Weirdos, just about every single song. And I was attempting to write songs. I bought a guitar, I bought an amp. I self-taught myself on guitar. Friends who knew how to guitar showed me a few chords. I attempted writing songs. I had a little Sony cassette tape recorder. I'd sit there and I'd attempt to write songs. I'd come up with titles. I'd work backwards from a title, and I just started writing songs. At some point, I figured out how to write a verse and a chorus, and I started putting songs together. I liked the thing that really influenced me was the Ramones, because I liked the way I said, when I heard them, I was like, wait, I can play like that. Because, I was not a virtuoso guitarist. I was self-taught. And I just started putting songs together, like A Life of Crime was one of the first songs I wrote. Do you know that song, A Life of Crime?
Yes.
And then the next song I write is I'm Not Like You. And then the next song I write is Teenage. And every time I write a song, I'm thinking of some sort of influence. It could be the Kinks, the Who, Eddie Cochran. It could be the Velvet Underground. It might have been something I picked up from the Ramones or the Sex Pistols or the Clash or the Buzzcocks or Link Ray or Dwayne Eddy or surf guitar, Dick Dale. And so or the Who and even maybe the Stones, so I kind of learned how to put together a song where there was a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so I would write intro, I would write a verse, I would come up with a chorus, I'd come up with a bridge, I'd come up with the solo, I'd come up with the hook, I'd come up with the ending. And, I would work on the dynamics of the song too. And, so we got, the Weirdos were known as a really tight unit. We rehearsed a lot and we were really tight, and we could do false endings, like Teenage had a false ending, and we could be real dynamic. We could, everyone, when they didn't know how to dance, they pogoed, at the go-go. That started with Weirdos pogoing with at the go-go, where everyone would come see us, and that they, on the dance floor, all they could do is dance vertical to the music, just jump up and down. They were pogoing.
Yeah.
But
so
I always thought the Weirdos was, like, okay, you want to have a good time, want to have fun, you want to rock out, you want to, and our lyrics and our songs were sort of either had to do with irony or a topic, current topics, or feminism, important issues, or or just things that were humorous, that just like, we like wrote a song like "I Dig Your Hole," and people thought that it was just, funny, and or "Do the Dance," which, we liked minimal lyrics like the Ramones. I also I liked the way the songs were real fast and there were no guitar solos. So we sort of came up with our own sort of style based on those influences. But
So
I was the main songwriter.
but John, you said John helped with lyrics?
Yeah, John and I collaborated on lyrics. Many times I would come up with the title, maybe a chorus, maybe a few verses, and then John would add a few lines.
And so that includes Teenage, Destroy All Music, Life of Crime, Why Do You Exist, Solitary Confinement, Neutron Bomb. That's all you who wrote the music to those songs.
Right. I write the music. I wrote A Life of Crime, Destroy All Music, the lyrics and the music, Teenage, I'm Not Like You, John and I collaborated on songs like Message from the Underworld and Solitary Confinement, and we got the Neutron Bomb.
Okay. Let's move to that first 7-inch, the first single on Bomb.
Mm-hmm.
Craig Leon produced it, and he's famous for doing the first Ramones album that you love so much.
Yeah, how about that? So we recorded a demo of 4 songs: Teenage, Destroy All Music, A Life of Crime, and a song called Why Do You Exist? And I take it to Greg Shaw. He's like, this sounds great. We could put this out. We were like, no, we think we can do better. And he tells me that he can get Craig Leon, because Craig Leon owed him a favor. Greg apparently used to manage a band called the Flamin' Groovies, a really incredible band, and he somehow Craig Leon owed him a favor, so he flies Craig Leon out in August. He lines up a home studio called Salty Dog in Sylmar. And it's we go to record Destroy All Music the night Elvis Presley is found dead. And so there we are. We did our first single with Bomb, Destroy All Music. We also designed the record sleeve and the label. I designed the label, and John Denny did the record sleeve and the artwork and the logo. And we did cut 3 tracks with Craig Leon. So it's actually a 7-inch EP with three tracks. And the A side is Destroy All Music. And the idea for Destroy All Music came to me when I watched a movie. I used to like to watch science fiction and monster movies. There was a movie called Destroy All Monsters. So I just switched it to Destroy All Music. And the theme in that song is, how there's Muzak. Muzak was big, and rock music had gotten really slick, and it was like it wasn't what we wanted to hear. the music we wanted to hear wasn't getting promoted. So I ripped up my tickets to see ELO, broke all my records and my stereo, and Destroy All Music, you just can't use it. So that, and then we record A Life of Crime. A Life of Crime, I'll look on YouTube, I'll search A Life of Crime, and there'll be like, a whole bunch of people have covered that song and put it out on YouTube. So that's a real popular song that gets covered. And
the classic.
That's a classic, right? A lot of people tell me that one and Destroy All Music are really favorites. And so A Life of Destroy All Music comes out on Bop, and we're one of like, there's only like about 9 punk records in existence at that point. There's the Ramones, maybe their first and second album. There's the Damned first album. There's, the Clash put a single out. The Sex Pistols put a couple singles out, and the Buzzcocks. And, there's the Saints album, and rest in peace, Chris Bailey from the Saints. He just passed away. And, that was about it. That was about it. The Germs put out a single, which was incredible, called Forming, before us. And the Dils put out a single. I think it was, I can't remember which one it was. I Hate the Rich. I'm not sure.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. And those were on What Records. So they kind of got out ahead of us. And then right around the same time, Devo was in town. They did a record with Bop, and so did the Zeros. So we were just one of the early releases.
Cliff, the first 7-inch is great, but the Solitary Confinement and we got the Neutron Bomb 7-inch, like, that thing is ridiculous. It's one of the greatest sounding albums ever. On this podcast, we've had arguments over what's better, side A, side B. I'd like you to, anything you remember about like that writing or recording process.
Yes.
If you want to dial into it, there's nothing too nerdy. Every detail, we'd love it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm sitting in my living room. I had read an article about the neutron bomb. So, it's the Cold War still. This is 1977. It's the Cold War. It's probably late 77, maybe around October or so, 77. I remember I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, about the neutron bomb, and I come up with a title, We Got the Neutron Bomb. And I start writing lyrics. We're going to drop it all over the place. You're going to get it on your face. United Nations and NATO won't do. It's just the red, white, and blue. It was very sarcastic, and it was along the lines of how we would write songs. And we don't know you. We don't know what you mean. We don't want you. We want your machines. So the neutron bomb. Say if the Soviet army, or the Soviet bloc army, attacked towards the western, west towards Eastern Europe, they were going to drop neutron bombs. It would kill everyone in the tanks and the vehicles, but leave the tanks and vehicles in nice condition so they could be used against the Soviets. That was the whole idea of the neutron bomb. So, and then, the chorus to that, we don't want it, but we got it anyway. I think I came up with that. John came up with a few of the lines too. And I was just sitting there, and it just came to me. I think I was working on the verse. We got the neutron bomb. I was working on that, and then we're gonna drop it all over the place. So I got the verse happening, and then I thought a nice. I wanted the first few notes just to be, like a bomb had hit. So that's why you hear those first 3 chords, blang, blang, blang. And I wrote that whole intro. It's kind of intricate, So we're, it's like D, A, E, and then A, E, D, A, E, and then back to D, 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 A, D, 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 A, and then down to E. Bom, ba, da, 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 da. So, I wrote this, the intro was pretty intricate, I remember we after we recorded it, and then we ended up recording, we first played it this is interesting. The first time we ever played it was we were doing we did a show with Crime in San Francisco on Halloween. That's the first time we played it live. And then we didn't have any shows in LA, but we had an interview on a radio broadcast with Richard Meltzer, who was a DJ for KPFK. So on Thanksgiving night, he has us on, interviews us, and we play live in the studio. And we played it live that night. I remember doing that. And then we recorded it late in 1977 with this label Danger House Records that kind of started up, because the whole punk thing in LA started coalescing around several things. It was coalescing around the little record companies like What Records, Bomp Records, and Danger House. It was coalescing around Sunday matinee shows at the Whiskey A Go-Go. That's how they did the punk shows. It was coalescing around the Canterbury apartments where punks started just moving in. It was coalescing around the Mask, which was a basement rehearsal hall performance space for punk bands under the Pussycat Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. And it started coalescing around Slash Magazine, Flipside Magazine, fanzines, and shows at the Whiskey, the Starwood, and then we were doing shows like at the Elks Lodge on Larchmont, at Myron's Ballroom. It was all do-it-yourself. We had to promote our own shows. We had to make our own flyers, make our own clothes. Now, back to Neutron Bomb, I kind of got off on a tangent there, but we all, Solitary Confinement, that came before Neutron Bomb. Now, Solitary Confinement, I wanted a song that descended those three chords. Da 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 da. And so I think that song has a great verse, so I'm descending those three chords, and then you go to the verse. I mean, that's the verse, and then you go to the chorus. I'm in da 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 da. I'm in da 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 da. And the title came from a friend of mine. He said, "Hey, Solitary Confinement would be a good title." I said, "Yeah, that would be good." So John came up with the lyrics for that. I brought the title to it and the music. And
Cliff, what do you remember about that recording though? Because it sounds so big.
Okay, so
and it's it has an interesting name, right? It's Kitchen Sink Studios,
right? So Kitchen Sink Studios was a 16-track studio on Sunset Boulevard, just east of Western, and it was in an old house. And right there on Sunset Boulevard was the entrance. So we walk in, and it's a tiny studio, but the guy who ran it was really cool. Danger House was doing all their recordings there. They did, the Dils, they did the Alley Cats, they did the Avengers, they did the Deadbeats there. They did, everything was done at Kitchen Sink for Danger House Records. And so we go in there and we lay down the basic tracks. So we got the basic tracks, the bass, drums, and rhythm guitars. I do remember using I had a small Fender like Princeton amp, and I thought it was kind of cool that we used that amp. I was playing a Vox guitar. That kind of, I forgot to mention, I had this vintage Vox guitar with a switch on it. It had a built-in distortion. So when I found this guitar, I bought it for about $130 at Valley Arts Guitar. And I plug it in and I turn on the distortion, and it had the sound I wanted. And it had a nice sort of, it really, if I hit a power chord, it would sustain into a nice feedback sound. So I really paid attention to, when I played, I would have to stand a certain way to get that. I'd have this invisible connection between the amp. And, if I moved the guitar just right, I'd get this beautiful sustain and feedback. And but another thing about the Weirdos, we were brand new. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. We barely knew how to tune our guitars and how to use an amp and dial in a sound. So we sort of grew up right on stage in front of everybody's eyes.
That record just sounds so much bigger than anything else.
So
it sounds bigger than either Dils record, and I'm just wondering what went into that. Is it just a happy accident, or
that's a good question. So how did we get that big sound? I think we did the basic tracks, then we overdubbed the guitars a second time, and then we added some of Dick's doing some lead guitar, and it somehow we got a nice big sound.
Right.
And we weren't using like Marshall stacks. We weren't in a big room. I used a little Fender practice amp, and we mic'd that. And I was using the Vox guitar with the distortion switch on. Dix probably played through a Marshall head and 412s, and they mic'd that. So he had a pretty big sound.
Okay.
Dix Denny had like the most awesome guitar sound. I mean, he was brilliant guitarist. He was just a teenager when he joined us that year in 1977. He was still a teenager. And I remember I called him up. I said, "Hey, Dix, John said I knew he was a good guitarist because I used to hang out at John's house all the time. His parents lived near Venice, near Will, Will, what's his name? That Will Rogers Beach, near Malibu, Will Rogers Beach, near Santa Monica. And I'd go there, and they had this little room. John and Dix had a bunk bed in like a tiny room. It was almost like a walk-in closet converted to a bedroom. And we would play records in there, and Dix would be sitting there, and he could play like anything. He could play, like Led Zeppelin guitar licks and stuff, real complicated stuff. He was a really good guitarist, and he was just this kid.
Right.
But he had a really big sound, and I used to play through a Fender Twin Reverb, but I remember using just that little amp, and they mic'd it, and they just like got the guitars to roar on that record. I don't think we doubled the bass. And the drums were mic'd real nice. We were really happy with that sound. I mean, it was like a once in a lifetime thing. I don't think we ever got that sound ever again.
Yeah, we talk about a lot on the podcast about how we wish you had just recorded every song you knew in that session. That way you'd have the best version of every Weirdos song.
Right. We should have. We were probably at our peak at that point. And the record came out. The record came out just like February of 78. The record didn't come out until February 78. I remember we finished mixing the record, and we hopped in the car and drove up to San Francisco so we could see the Sex Pistols the next night at Winterland, which we did. And then the record comes out. Rodney played it. K-Rock played it. And we got a little bit of airplay. Back then K-Rock was AM and FM. And then it helped when we played the Whiskey. We got a nice crowd. I ran ads on K-Rock too. Weirdos at the Whiskey, and they would play Neutron Bomb. And I remember we had a real nice concert there right after Neutron Bomb came out at the Whiskey. And, towards the end of 1977 and early 78, I had also written some other really good songs. We were always a step ahead of everyone else. And the band, yes, we should have recorded a whole album right then and there. That was, we always thought we were going to get signed and then we would record an album, but it never happened. And, there we were in Los Angeles, Capitol Records, Warner Brothers Records, Reprise Records, CBS, everyone's there, Arista, all the record companies, and Chrysalis, and we couldn't get a deal because Warner Brothers signed the Pistols, and they were like, well, we don't need another Sex Pistols. And we weren't really another Sex Pistols, but, we were the Weirdos. And we just couldn't catch a break. We even recorded a second version of Neutron Bomb and a track, It Means Nothing, as a demo and shopped it around, but to no avail.
Yeah, Cliff, there was actually a rumor I heard once that you guys had a little bit of beef with the Dickies because they got a major label. Is there any truth to that?
No, we never had a beef with the Dickies. The Dickies came after the Weirdos. They kind of, some bands kind of looked at us for inspiration and ideas, and obviously, if you look at the Weirdos and then you look at the Dickies, especially the early Dickies, the looks are similar, the tempos, some of the songs, but the Dickies were really good. They had help from people like Stephen Hofstetter, one of the great guitarists from the LA punk rock scene. He was in the Quick, and he helped Stan Lee get his sound together and write some of the songs. They mainly covered songs. That was their main thing. If you look at like all their early releases were all, Sound of Silence, Paranoid. They just covered songs. Gigantor, that was my favorite. And I was kind of friends with the keyboard player,
Chuck Wagon.
Chuck Wagon, yeah.
Yeah.
And we used to like borrow gear. I remember he lent me his electric piano or his keyboard, and then he sadly died, and but yeah, there was never, we even opened we were packaged with the Dickies at clubs, and venues. So I never had any big issue with the Dickies. I mean, they got signed and to A&M Records and put out some good records. We even their manager John Hewlett was our manager for a period too. In 1979, he recorded demos for us. He tried to get us signed. He tried to put a record label together and have us on the label, and nothing ever really happened. So, the band only lasted for a short period. The Weirdos, our year was 1977 because we do that show at the Orpheum. Then we're asked to play The Whiskey by Kim Fowley for his new wave rock and roll showcase. From there, we get photographed. They ask us to come back a second night, and then we get photographed backstage, and the photo appears in Time magazine. In an article on punk rock, the very first article on punk rock in Time magazine, in the July issue of 1977, titled "Youth Crime," and then we do our record on, and then Slash magazine puts John on the cover of their second issue, and they interview us, and then we're booked to headline The Whiskey. We're booked to support the Runaways at the Whiskey. We're booked to play. We do a big show when we get signed with Bomb. Greg Shaw puts on a show at Myron's Ballroom. So it's the Weirdos with this new band in town called Devo opening for us, and the Dils. I asked to put the Dils on the show, and that was in August, summer of '77. And then by September. We have our single out, Destroy All Music on Bomb. We're doing lots of press. And we play the Hollywood Palladium with Blvd and Devo opening for us. And that was like, that sort of like was the culmination of everything, that big show in September of 1977.
Cliff, back to the Neutron Bomb. There was another band from LA called the Controllers. Right. And they had a song called Neutron Bomb. Did yours come first, and was there any sort of rivalry over like that name?
Well, unbeknownst to me, they wrote a song called Neutron Bomb. I had no idea. And so they always claim, oh, the Weirdos copied us. But I didn't know they had a song called Neutron Bomb. I was surprised when I heard that. So I don't know. Have you heard their version of Neutron Bomb?
Yes.
How does it compare to our version? We got the Neutron Bomb.
It's not as good because pretty much nothing in the world is as good as your version of Neutron Bomb.
Right? Okay. So
But it's still good.
Maybe they were a little jealous. I didn't even pay attention to that. You know, I remember one day we were joking around maybe with Stingray and the guitarist from the Controllers, Kid Spike.
Yeah.
You know, they would just sort of like, you know, try to make a big deal about it. That I didn't really pay attention to that. But I did not take the title from their record. That I thought of myself.
That's cool, man. We're Team Weirdos all day.
Oh, cool.
While we're talking about the old stuff, let me just knock one more out of the way.
All right.
Can you describe what the mask was like?
Sure. So the mask was basically a big basement underneath the Pussycat Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. Now the building was there was a director, a famous director named DeMille. What was his first name? Cecil B. DeMille.
Yep.
So I think it was the Cecil B. DeMille building. And Brendan Mullen, who I didn't know, but during the summer of 1977, he found the space, he rented it out, and then he started a rehearsal space. And we started to hear about it. Now, look, we're already like headlining the Whiskey, the Starwood, we play the Hollywood Palladium, Myron's Ballroom, the Slash Benefit. I mean, and you know, to play the mask was just you couldn't, you know, they didn't charge anything. There was no, you go down into the cellar, and it was this labyrinth of concrete rooms. And there was one sort of the largest room. It wasn't really a big room, and it was kind of dangerous. There was one way in and one way out. And I remember it stunk. It smelled like the bathrooms. Nothing was cleaned. It smelled like cigarettes and beer and barf, and it was pretty smelly. It was hot. There was no air in there. But that's where people lived there. People rehearsed there, a bunch of bands, and then they started doing shows. They built a little stage. We eventually played there in November with the Screamers 2 nights on a weekend, and then we came back, and I think we played there New Year's Eve, 1977, New Year's Eve with Black Randy and Arthur J. and the Gold Cups. And then they shut it down. Later on in February of 78, we actually filmed a TV pilot down there. I don't know, have you ever seen that, where we're down in the mask? It's the original Weirdos. And there's this guy named Dick Whittington, or Whittinghill, I forget. And he's sort of like he was filming a pilot for a show called At Night, LA at Night, or something like that. So they heard, somehow they contacted Slash Magazine, and they said, we want to see what a punk show is like. So Slash contact me, and you guys want to play down in the mask? We couldn't charge because the mask was closed. So it's more like a TV, you know, it was just like a filming of a TV show. And everyone is down. Have you guys ever seen this video?
No, I didn't know about this.
Oh, so the audience is like everyone who's in a punk band, LA punk band at the time. You know, you see everybody, you know, the Germs, the Go-Go's, and it's just a big mosh pit. We're playing, it's the original Weirdos. We play Destroy All Music. We play A Life of Crime. We got the Neutron Bomb. We play Solitary Confinement, Message from the Underworld. And then they cut it off. And it's hilarious. Unfortunately, this guy is like talking while we're playing and everyone's dancing. The guy's like talking over it, you know. But it's like a really incredible document of the mask and what it was like.
Amazing. Now, around the end of the 70s, a lot of younger kids from the suburbs start coming to shows and starting bands in the suburbs. Was there tension between that kind of class, that generation of punk kids, and your, the first generation that the Weirdos were a part of?
Not really. I mean, we did shows with all those bands. We did shows with middle class. That's what you're talking about, right? Bands like middle class. And we did some shows with the Gears. We did shows with a lot of those bands. The only thing we started noticing, it was getting kind of violent in the audience. There would be a lot of guys, shaved heads, and they were just pushing people around or beating people up. And I think we were down in the South Bay. We were supposed to do a show at the Fleetwood, and we didn't like the look of some of the people who were waiting to get inside. They looked like they were waiting for the music to start so they could just, break heads. And we just left. We didn't, so that was like, there was a little bit of that going on. But most of the time.
Cliff, what year would that have been, you think?
That was 1979. So, the hardcore, bands like Black Flag and Circle Jerks had already started playing, and you were getting more of a hardcore. It was very different. The LA punk scene was one of the greatest music scenes in history. I mean, you had bands like the Bags, fronted by Alice Bagg, with Pat Morrison on bass, two females. We had the Go-Go's came out of the scene, all female band. There was Charlotte Caffey played bass in the Eyes. That's where we first saw her. There was a girl drummer in the Controllers, several of them. There was Diane Chai, bass player for the Alley Cats. So there was the Alley Cats playing. There was the Deadbeats. There was so many incredible bands. There was the Screamers. Did you ever see the Screamers?
I saw what was left of the Screamers in 2001.
No. So the Screamers were like incredible. So there was the Weirdos, the Screamers. Yeah, the Dickies came along and they got signed, and then they got to go to New York and England because they had money. There was the band the Dils. There was the Germs. There was the Plugs. One of the best bands I thought was the Plugs. There was the Skulls. There was a lot of great groups. The Wall of Voodoo came out of the scene, it was just an incredible scene. The variety of bands and music. Basically, everyone did records. Whoever did records with Danger House and Bomb, that was the scene. And what records, And then Posh Boy started putting out albums with like compilation albums with bands like the Adolescents, and that really shook things up. The Adolescents with that song. What was their first big song? Was
Amoeba.
Amoeba. I mean, when you heard that on the radio, I couldn't believe it. It was became one of my favorite songs.
That's what I was going to get to is bands like the Adolescents and TSOL,
right?
And early Black Flag with Keith Morris on vocals. Like, do you think that these bands were sort of bridging your generation of punk to what would then become known as hardcore? In other words, do you think they fall somewhere in between punk and hardcore?
Yes. And that's what I was talking about. Part of the diversity of the bands. I mean, each band kind of had its own unique sound. And it was when those bands came along, of course, Black Flag, eventually hooked up with Henry Rollins and Kira Rossler. And then the Circle Jerk, Keith Morris moved from Black Flag to the Circle Jerks. They became hugely popular. So those bands are like putting out albums now. And so, I think even the Adolescents put out an incredible album, their first album. And then by the early 80s, the Weirdos were done. John left the band. He wanted a shot at pursuing an acting career, he told me. And after that, we only did reunion shows. And but in the early 80s, you had like hardcore bands. There was a scene out of Oxnard, the Nardcore scene, and bands like Ill Repute, who I just did a couple shows with. Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
And so you had the Nardcore scene and those bands. I mean, I missed that whole hardcore thing that happened in the early 80s. I was doing a synth band. I was in a synthesizer band called Martini Ranch, and we were playing like Club Lingerie. And I was in a whole different scene, I was working on music with Mark Mothersbaugh was producing our demo, people like that.
With Bill Paxton from Weird Science, right?
Now, Bill Paxton, he came after I left that band.
Oh, okay.
So I leave Martini Ranch. The singer, Billy Bones, or Steve Fortuna, he was Billy Bones and the Skulls. That was another early LA punk band that was really good because that featured not only Billy Bones, Steve Fortuna on vocals, but Bruce Moreland and Mark Moreland. The Moreland brothers were in the Skulls. So we sort of asked Bruce to play bass in the Weirdos in 78. So he leaves the Skulls. And then Mark Moreland and Bruce eventually team up with Stan Ridgway to form Wall of Voodoo in 1979. And so, it was a great period, and I was really, we just got lucky. We were in the right place at the right time. But there were a lot of things that kind of, led up to that maybe it wasn't always luck. It had to do with, our personalities, music we liked and meeting each other and putting a band together. It was collaborative. And in LA, there just happened to be a lot of people like-minded, and we were all mainly fans of bands like Iggy and the Stooges, the Velvet Underground, the Ramones, the British bands, and the New York Dolls, and David Bowie. So when we would talk to people, oh yeah, we used to go see David Bowie. We were, I'll talk to people, and we were probably at all the same David Bowie concerts, and but those bands, they were kind of a bridge to the hardcore scene. I really don't know a whole lot about the hardcore scene. I kind of missed it, but I remember, there was like the Dead Kennedys too. So we used to. The Weirdos never got out of California, really. We would play L.A., and then we could drive up to San Francisco and play Mabuhay Gardens, and we had a lot of fans in the Bay Area, and fortunately there was a group of videographers up there called Target Video, and they got some of the early Weirdo shows. Maybe not the early, but from 78, 79, and 80, they got a lot of Weirdo shows on video, and all the other bands. There was the Cramps were around back then too, and the Dead Kennedys, and all the San Francisco scene was pretty cool. The Dils were up there, the Avengers, and the Mutants, and Flipper, and Negative Trend. So there was a real cool scene going on up there, and the Offs. And so we did a lot of shows in San Francisco and then in LA. We never made it to, probably a big mistake was, and one of, I kind of regret that we never got to play CBGBs. I know the Dickies did, and the Screamers and the Dils, maybe the Zeros. And so some bands made it to New York and played CBGBs, but we just were mainly LA and then San Francisco for the most part.
Well, right on. I mean, no one can discount the legacy of the Weirdos.
Oh,
and Cliff, we are so appreciative of you taking the time and letting us punish you. And thanks so much for doing this.
I probably talk too much. Sorry.
Well, we talk every week, so it's cool.
Cool. Yeah.
You know? It's your first time on, so we've punished everyone way more than you ever could.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much. Do you feel well represented?
Yes, I do.
Awesome.
And
Thanks, Cliff.
You're welcome. And thank you, Ben, for lining it up. Thank you, Zach. It's nice to talk to both of you.
All right, we're going to do a One's Gotta Go on the Danger House 7 inches. And we are going a little out of LA because that's what's up. I didn't choose all LA. We are going to do the Dils 7 inch on Danger House, which is which one, Ben? Do you have it in front of you?
198 seconds of the Dils.
All right, we're doing the Bag 7 inch. We're doing Neutron Bomb, the Weirdos, and we are doing the Avengers 7 inch. They are from San Francisco. Don't get at me. Now, from the Cliff Roman interview, you know, the Zeros, I always consider them a Chula Vista band, but he did talk about them moving to LA. Maybe we could have tossed that in and done like a Bomb Danger House mashup, but nah. Tonight, we're just doing all Danger House. These 4 7 inches are all classics. This is going to be really painful. Dan, you're the first to suffer. Which one are you losing?
So they all have like absolute, it's something you touched on in the previous segment. This is so early that anyone who is treading into this genre and, they're probably only just, the Sex Pistols are huge, so they're learning about that possibly coming, in music press. And then, so this is, and a little bit of New York, but for the most part, this is its own thing springing up, and wow, it's fantastic. West Coast, amazing music. The Avengers, I absolutely love. I love the tunefulness of her voice dancing over the great punk music. This isn't my favorite release by them, but it's my second favorite. So I really love it. The Bags is so interesting because, like we said, you got that film noir stuff, like her legs went all the way up to the 12 o'clock hour and her stems were the, whatever. That's my film noir bullshit. But it's really interesting on the A side, and then the B side is just a crusher. That Babylonian Gorgon is such a great song. Then you've got the Dils, which is probably the most straightforward punk out of the 4, and faster, shorter, maybe a little bit louder, and it's really catchy in its own right too. And then you also said that they're from Carlsbad, so that's pretty cool. That there was besides the Zeros, there was another San Diego band in the mix around that time. And then you've got the Neutron Bomb, which drops the Neutron Bomb on the rest of these records. So that one's not going anywhere. That, on the strength of 2 epic songs, we've got the Neutron Bomb slightly outshines side B, but I love both songs. I think, and I hate to do it, the Avengers and the Weirdos are safe, and now it comes down to Dils versus Bags. And just for the strength of the variety that the Bags give us, and the and to fuck the patriarchy, I'm keeping Bags, Avengers, Neutron Bomb, and I gotta say sayonara to the Dils.
It hurts to agree with the better looking, better dressed version of me, but I'm just chasing Dan. I narrowed down the same way. It's like I can't lose this Avengers. This actually is my favorite Avengers stuff. We Are the One being their greatest song by far, in my opinion. But the other two songs in the 7-inch, No Slouches, there's no way you can lose Neutron Bomb, Solitary Confinement, two of the greatest punk songs of all time, backed up by one of the greatest punk recordings of all time. Like, those are safe, right? The Dils, it's wild. The song Class War, I love the verses so much, and then the chorus is like it's like a classic shouted, simple punk chorus. It's a pretty perfect song. I think that they are the most interesting in their first two 7-inches. That song, You're Not Blank, like the melodies they hit there with the rhythms are really weird and cool, and it would have made it a lot closer, because I can't lose that Bag song either. You know, just thinking about like a dude in a trench coat on a rainy night trying to find some, solace from the rain underneath like the light post, flipping a quarter, wondering what way he's going to go. You know, like they capture that in such like a wild way, that's not like a gloomy Tom Waits song, and so I can't lose it. Dils, you're out of here. It hurts. Shout out Lose Records. Shout out Juanita's Taqueria. But Carlsbad, sorry. Actually, that was fucking Encinitas. Carlsbad's sick too, though. So what's up? That would be Spin Records in Carlsbad. And I don't know what Taqueria. But Ben, what's your take?
Yeah. Just for clarification, the B-side of that single's Mr. Big. Oh, you were saying if You're Not Blank had been the B-side, then it would have been closer. That's what you were saying, right?
That's right. Correct.
Okay, yeah. It's funny. Our reasoning is identical, all three of us, because what do we think first? Weirdos, best shit ever. Of course, that's fucking safe. And then number 2, Avengers. So then it comes down between Dils and Bags. That's exactly what I thought too. And just to get into some of the songs, We Are the One, incredible. American and Me is also a great Avengers song. I don't know which one I like.
That one's my favorite.
Yeah, which is not on this record. Yeah, this record is actually 3 songs. It's We Are the One, I Believe in Me, and Car Crash. And I Believe in Me is great because the verses are just her just talking shit. She's not singing. She's just calling you an asshole. It's so good. I love when punk songs do that, where it's just like free form shit talking. And We Are the One of the all time great punk anthems. So moving on to the ones that are in danger, Bag Survive with Babylonian Gorgon, and then the Dils. The funny thing about the song Class War by the Dils is listen to that back to back with Uncontrollable Urge by Devo and Misty Mountain Hop by Led Zeppelin. I swear it's the same riff on all 3 of those songs. And it makes me wonder, Devo and the Dils, both closet Zeppelin fans? And I think in the case of the Dils, quite possibly, because the way Cliff describes the first time they played with the Dils, they were like a regular rock band. And then like 2 weeks later, after seeing the Weirdos or playing with the Weirdos, they were like a punk band. So, but I like Led Zeppelin. So that's not a mark against that song at all. But I am, just like Dan and Zach, picking the Dils because as the one that has to go or has got to go. Because come on, man, the Bags, Survive. That's I don't want to live in a world without that song.
Dude, it's unanimous. It hurts because those 2 Dill singles are ill. And I got like nice bootlegs of them in the last 10 years. So they're fun to have. They're out there, people. Keep your eyes peeled. Support local record shops. You know what's up.
But you know what? There's things called fun facts and then unfun facts.
Fun facts and then unfun facts.
That's where 7 Seconds got their name, by the way.
What?
The Kevin and his brother thought this record was called 197 Seconds of the Dils, and they carved it into their desk, and the 7 seconds part of it was like carved deeper or something. And Kevin's like, that's a cool name for a band.
Fun fact with Ben Edge.
Side A versus Side B.
All right, we are doing Side A versus Side B on the Beach Boulevard compilation. Came out in 1979 on Posh Boy Records. And Ben, this is one of your favorite LPs of all time. Is this coming out of that first wave and going into what you call 1.5?
Absolutely. Not every moment, not every band on it, but there are definite. This is sort of the shape of punk to come. Ugh, I hate to quote a Refused album, but this is sort of the tipping point for Southern California punk, where like the power base is shifting away from Hollywood and into the suburbs. I actually wrote an entire chapter in a book about this one record, and the name of the book is The White Label Promo Preservation Society, 100 Flop Albums You Ought to Know. And so I really drilled down deep into this record. The weird thing about this record is it's essentially 3 EPs by 3 different bands. So you have 5 songs, but 5 songs each by 3 different bands. But the way the side breaks are, you have songs from all 3 bands on both sides of the record. So it's kind of odd. It's almost like a mirror of itself. It's like the crowd straddles the end of side A and the beginning of side B, and then you move backwards into the other bands. But like Simple Tones, to me, they sound like a punkified Danny and the Juniors, which was that group from the 50s that sang At the Hop and Rock and Roll Is Here to Stay. Especially the song Tiger Beat Twist. And then Christy Q is like a love song about a girl that one of the members was dating. And they actually were supposed to be extras in the film Rock and Roll High School, but they just banged instead. So they missed their chance at being extras in that movie. And then I love the line where he's telling her, let's do it on our feet at the Starwood. It's like you're at a music venue and you're like having sex on your feet. It's kind of gross, but different strokes for different folks. And then I love how the song California is like the most like California thing ever. And there's that line about how the cars, they go so fast. And it's like, why would the cars go faster in California than like Michigan or Arkansas? I don't understand that, but I accept it. And then moving on to Rick L. Rick. So if you look at this on streaming, it says Negative Trend featuring Rick L. Rick as the artist. On the record itself, it just says Rick L. Rick. This is indeed the band Negative Trend, and Rick L. Rick was their 3rd singer. So that's the confusion. It's like Rob Fields himself, the owner of Posh Boy Records, decided like, I'm just going to rebrand this thing Rick L. Rick because I think he's a star. It's like old school Hollywood showbiz kind of mentality. But yeah, Negative Trend are from San Francisco. So you have here we have another San Francisco band that's kind of on a SoCal label. And I really dig how he's got that cool baritone crooning voice, very similar to Glenn Danzig. And the lyrics are, he mentions straight edge actually, although it doesn't relate at all to, the drug-free lifestyle. In fact, I think the song Black and Red might be about shooting heroin. So, and then there are more political songs like Mercenaries, but it's almost like kind of a sarcastic stab at politics, about how these like kill for pay soldiers are involved in foreign intervention of communist countries. And so they're quote unquote keeping America free but by dying for General Motors. So I really dig that. And you also hear like call and response gang vocals on that song, which is kind of like a thing that you hear a lot more in like 80s hardcore music. But this is like pretty early for that kind of shouted gang vocal thing. And then moving on to the crowd, who are actually from Huntington Beach. Susie is a surf rocker, which is, I assume the same character that the Ramones sang about in Susie is a Headbanger. It's sort of like punks love Susie and Judy. Those names keep coming up. And rap guys like Roxanne. I don't know what. It's just someone starts it and then everyone else runs with it. But I think the way I would describe the crowd is the influence of the Damned on surf music. If you just smash together 60s instrumental surf music with the Damned, and so you have like supercharged fast punk but with more of a surf beat, that's pretty much what the crowd is. And I suspect they're a huge influence on TSOL. And then you have great songs like Living in Madrid and Tricks Are for Kids, and of course Modern Machine, which is the one that Rodney Bingenheimer played a lot on his radio show. But looking at the track list, it looks like my favorite crowd song might be Living in Madrid, which is on side A. My favorite Negative Trend with Rick L. Rick song would probably be I Got Power, which is on side B. So the tiebreaker would be whatever my favorite Simple Tone song is, which would probably be fuck man, I don't know. I Have a Date, Tiger Beat Twist, probably something on side A. There's more Simple Tone songs on side A. All three of those are pretty equal. So I'm going side A by a fraction of a hair.
The crowd bodies everything on this record. Those songs are so good. It's out of this world. Everything else is cool. I like the Meat House song a lot. I Got Power a lot. Simple Tones, I can pretty much lose them. Sorry, Ben. I guess I Have a Date is kind of nostalgic just to shout out the Cinema Beer compilations. But other than that, whatevs. The crowd, the first song, Susie is a Surf Rocker, is whatever too also. But after that, those four songs are so fucking good. It kills it. And this LP kills me because they split up the crowd, like part on side A and part on side B. And I wish that I could put on this record and listen to these songs in a row on a side. Or I wish they were an EP or something. It's just kind of unfair that they're like the middle of this, or like I can't just put on a side and I'm missing a couple songs. The best song from the crowd, in my opinion, is that Modern Machine song. They do that wild stuff, which you can totally see would be something that could influence like the Adolescents, something like a Kids of the Black Hole. And yeah, that song is just so ill, but really those four in a row, the Living in Madrid through New Crew, these are all just like down-strummed, up-tempo, like mid-tempo bangers, like perfect punk songs. It's wild. Since I get three of them, no. This hurts, dude. Because I got three on side A, but Modern Machine is on side B. Fuck it. We've always argued a 10 beats a bunch of 9s, right? So I'm taking the side with Modern Machine because it's the best song. It's the first song on side B, and so I'm going side B all day. Dan, where are you at?
All right. Well, this is interesting. The crowd do represent a lot of the better songs on this compilation, but they have, in my opinion, the worst song on this comp, which is Tricks Are for Kids. I hate it. I hate that song. And you know what? It totally, and this shouldn't, it reminded me of that awful t-shirt in the 90s that was sold at many head shops that was Tricks related. I don't know if anyone remembers it, but it should be burned in hell. It's very offensive and stupid, and I can't believe that it was sold in such wide release and lots of people bought it, and you'd probably see it at some punk shows. It's absolutely horrible.
Dan, that song rips so hard, I'm so offended right now. Because it sounds like Ramones like playing live with like a Lee Ving-esque character shouting over the top of it. It's like, I don't know how you cannot like that. I'm pulling your punk card, dude. You're out of here.
Because it's going tricks of a kid. It's awful. Anyway, the second worst song is Tiger Beat Twist, which is like doing a nod to, what is it, Mud that did Tiger Feet, maybe, but also a nod to the 50s, like, music. And I mean, I can see where it's lying. I just didn't enjoy it. But I Have a Date, as Zach said, was covered by the Vandals on Cinema Goggles, yeah. And Zach still wonders where that girl has gone.
She was a beauty.
But I really enjoy that song and Black and Red. But the best song on the compilation for me, just beating Modern Machine by The Crowd, is I Got Power by Negative Trend, featuring Rock. I mean, Rick L. Rick.
That fool's a star.
Yeah, side B takes it because I like California, like Ben said. It is just a pastiche of playing California games on your Sega Genesis while boarding down the Hollywood Hills.
While hanging out in HB on, yeah, Johnny Wood.
Yeah, I'm going side B because it's got the back-to-back, well, not quite back-to-back, but it's got Modern Machine, and then I Got Power 2 songs later, and it just, those are the best two on the comp for me. It's iconic artwork, like this is a comp that you've always seen, and it's called Beach Boulevard because it goes from Huntington to West Covina, where
Westminster, right?
Yeah, where the Negative Trend dudes are from. So it's like spanning where all the bands along that stretch of road can be located. Also, I believe our very humble but great compatriot Bedge has written something about this comp in a book.
Yeah, I plugged the book at the beginning. You weren't listening. That's cool. No offense taken. I just want to make...
Dude, he was paying attention to that vegan chicken masala, man.
Seriously.
I want to make one correction. Negative Trend is from San Francisco, but Rick L. Rick is from Covina, California. So
okay.
You do have that connection with, I guess, Beach Boulevard. It's really kind of playing... it's really stretching the geography with naming this comp Beach Boulevard. Simple Tones from Rosemead, California, which is pretty close to, West Covina and Covina. So that's where all these bands are from.
But if this was recorded by Death Row in 1993, it would be called the Biatch Boulevard.
Wow. After Ben had to murk X's female vocals, now Dan comes with that. We're over, dude.
No, I'm just referencing words that were, the parlance of our times, man.
That's true. We're from a different time, man. That's what it is. Ben, final thoughts on this and also this episode.
Well, this is some of my favorite shit. You know it. Me and Dan are always pushing you to talk more 70s shit. And so now we have a whole episode on 70s shit. And not just that, but where we, asterisk next to Dan's name, are from Southern California. I just think it's cool. Like, a lot of this is the first shit I ever heard, punk-wise, because my dad's friend Gene Scolati made me, mixtapes with this stuff on it. So maybe that helps me care a lot about this kind of stuff. But I do really think it's great punk music that really holds up. And a lot of this stuff kind of gets short shrift because I think most of these bands didn't tour And most of these bands didn't put out full albums, or they didn't put out albums that were that great. The Crowd being an example. This material on Beach Boulevard blows away anything else they ever did. So that is a kind of a formula to be forgotten somewhat, but this stuff has an audience. There's a cult for it. Everyone listen to it, please. You'll get a better idea of where this thing called hardcore really comes from.
Yeah, and we should just say, like, the version on Spotify here is like an extendo version. So check Discogs if you want the real, if you want the real track list and so forth. We'll put some of the songs on the playlist, 185milesouth.com. Click that playlist at the top of the page and listen to the music that we talk about. Dan, final thoughts on this episode?
Yeah. Did Muldoon attack?
Yeah, he's mad. I was away for a couple of days.
The thing about this stuff, and the majority of it, not the entire sound of everything we've discussed this episode, though, is how regional this does sound. You know, it is very West Coast on a lot of it. And I think that's awesome. I love when, you know, your surroundings are just filtering into your music. It's fantastic. It is really cool to talk about, you know, dip back into some of the old stuff that perhaps in this day and age doesn't get passed down in the way things did in the past a lot more. Now everyone's got everything at the fingertips, so there's not only a few hours in the day that you can even dive into newer things, and you want to go back to the stuff that you know and love. Well, if you'd never been turned on to We Got the Neutron Bomb, and this is your first time, like, maybe going and finding it and listening to it, like, I'm jealous of you, because this is going to be an epic moment in your life.
Right. It'll be like watching Shawshank Redemption the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. Or The Godfather, something like that, you know?
Right.
But yeah, it's been fantastic talking about this stuff. I can't wait to hear you two speak to Cliff, and, you know, it's great.
Hell yeah. You know, I just want to say, like, it's really rad that, like, almost all this stuff is out there. So punk is so vast, and, you know, it has a 40+ year history. You know, and it's all there for you. So it's cool to find whatever lane you want. And there's nothing wrong with, like, just liking, you know, I don't give a fuck. If you just like Hatebreed, like, that's cool. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to branch out and, like, get the whole history, you want to check this out. It's really cool that all this old stuff is up on streaming. So there's really no excuse to not, you know, there's no excuse. You got to check it out, you know? And also, I'm looking at some of you labels that haven't put all your stuff up, like Crucial Response Records. You know, like, your shit is straight getting forgotten to history. Like, even your Bandcamp is lame. You know, you got, like, one song up from, like, each band. So you're going to get forgotten if you don't, like, let your stuff be available to the people. Right? So we love that stuff. I want to talk Sportswear and Mean Strike and Eyeball. I love these bands. I love the For the Sake of Dedication comp. And that stuff is straight up in the hardcore ghost town, you know, except for the people that were around. And so make it available for people. Like, what are you doing? People, like, that they got the rights to records, you're sitting on it, put it up there, because, like, people need to discover it. Every little, like, building block in this big, beautiful beast that we call hardcore punk rock is important. And I want it to be out there for everyone to figure out. Like, it's 2022. Like, we're not living in the 90s. We're not living in the 80s when, like, there's, like, stuff's not available. You know what I mean? Like, everything should be available now. Like, that's just the way the world is, you know? So put it out there, let people figure it out. And that's all I got. You guys want to comment on my rant, or should we wrap this up?
No, I think that it's, imagine you're a label person, right? And you're just sat there basically being lazy. How do you think the people who put that music out and trusted you to curate their output feel that you aren't putting it up? Like, now they're getting forgotten because you're twiddling your thumbs. And I think that's a very valid point.
Yeah, dude. Handle business, people. Ben, you got anything, or are we out of here?
I'm not one to talk. I've been in many bands that are not on streaming. I agree with you, but I'm lazy, so that's where I stand.
Yeah, dude. Hey, Chris Grande, put that Field of Fire shit up on Spotify because Ben's never going to do it. All right, everyone. We'll talk to you a week from today. That will be next Monday about more hardcore. Goodbye. Okay.